You ever watch someone about to make the biggest mistake of their life and just know it's coming? That's exactly what happened tonight, only the person making the mistake wasn't the quiet woman in the crowd. It was the man on stage. Her name was Lila Carter, and she had no business being at a sold-out concert in downtown Chicago. The ticket had sat untouched in her kitchen drawer for weeks, wedged between old grocery lists and a half-used roll of tape. It had been a gift from her coworker Marcy, who'd won it in some radio contest and insisted Lila take it. "You need to leave your apartment sometime," Marcy had said, sliding the glossy ticket across the desk. And no, ordering Thai food while watching documentaries about penguins doesn't count as socializing. Now here Lila was, squeezed into a velvet seat that probably cost more than her rent. The theater shimmered under crystal chandeliers, the air thick with perfume and expectation. People around her looked flawless, all designer suits, sequin dresses, and practiced laughter. Lila glanced down at her denim jacket and scuffed sneakers, feeling like she'd accidentally wandered into the wrong universe. The woman next to her, platinum blonde hair, glittering jewelry, leaned over with a friendly smile. "First time seeing Caleb Vance live?" Lila nodded. "Yeah, first time here at all." "Oh, you're in for a treat," the woman said knowingly. "I've seen every major act perform on this stage. Caleb's a bit of a showman, though. Flashy. Gorgeous voice, but he knows it." Lila smiled politely. She didn't really follow pop stars, but she'd heard a few of his songs on the radio, catchy, polished, maybe a little too perfect. Still, live music had its own magic. There was something about waiting with a room full of strangers, that collective breath before the lights drop and the first note hits. The chandeliers dimmed, and that breath came. The crowd erupted, neon lights rippling across the stage like ocean waves. When Caleb Vance strode into the spotlight, Lila finally understood the hype. He looked like he'd stepped out of a dream, tall, dark-haired, wearing a navy suit that fit as though the fabric itself worshipped him. "Good evening, Chicago." His voice rolled through the hall, smooth as aged bourbon. The roar that followed was deafening. Caleb grinned like a man feeding off their devotion. He launched into his hit single, every lyric rehearsed, every movement choreographed to perfection. Lila had to admit, the man could sing. His control was flawless, every high note shimmering. And yet, something about it felt hollow. Like watching an expensive commercial instead of an artist bearing his soul. Between songs, Caleb worked the crowd with slick precision. "How's everyone feeling tonight?" he called, cupping a hand to his ear. The audience screamed until the walls shook. "I can't hear you," he teased, and they screamed louder. "That's what I'm talking about," he said, flashing that perfect smile. "You know, I've performed all over the world, but there's something special about being here tonight with all you beautiful people." Lila noticed he never actually said Chicago. Probably used the same line in every city. The crowd didn't seem to mind. They adored him, every wink, every laugh. As the show went on, the cracks began to show. Caleb's charisma carried a faint sneer, compliments that sounded like backhanded jokes, playful remarks that brushed too close to mockery. "I love performing for real people," he said during a pause, pacing the edge of the stage. "Not critics, not executives, just regular folks living regular lives. Keeps me grounded, you know?" The crowd cheered, oblivious. Lila caught the subtext. Regular folks. He said it like a zoologist studying a rare species. She'd heard that tone before, from bosses who smiled while reminding her she was replaceable, from men who mistook quietness for weakness. The blonde woman beside her sighed dreamily. "He's so authentic." Lila bit back a laugh. Authentic was the last word she'd use. Everything about him, his effortless banter, his self-deprecating jokes, even the way he adjusted his cufflinks, felt rehearsed. Beautiful, but artificial. He moved into another upbeat track, the lights flaring gold and violet. Lila checked her phone, mostly to look busy. Marcy would demand a full report Monday morning. "Did you have fun? Did you talk to anyone?" Did you finally act like a human being for once? Maybe she'd lie and say yes. At least the music was decent. But everything changed halfway through the show. Caleb dimmed the lights and stepped off the stage, microphone in hand. The crowd gasped as he walked down the aisles, singing a stripped-down love ballad about finding truth in a world of masks. Phones shot up like fireflies, desperate to record every second. Lila slouched, trying not to draw attention. She wasn't here to be part of the spectacle, she just wanted to make it to intermission without regretting her life choices. Then, suddenly, he looked at her. Their eyes met across the dim light. Lila wasn't screaming or filming or reaching out, she was just sitting there, calm, unimpressed, and a little tired. And that, apparently, was all it took to interest him. "Well, hello there," he said, grinning as he changed direction. "You look like you're having the time of your life." A ripple of laughter spread around them. Lila felt her face heat up. "I'm enjoying the music," she said carefully. "Oh, I can tell," Caleb teased, his smile sharpening. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Lila." "Lila," he repeated, tasting the name like wine. "Tell me, Lila, what do you do when you're not attending concerts in your weekend casual look?" More laughter. Someone snickered behind her. The word stung, but she forced a small smile. "I work in an office." "An office?" He clapped once, theatrically. "That's adorable. You probably think those singing competitions on TV are real art, huh?" The mockery was clear now, his tone cruel under the charm. Phones lifted again, cameras waiting for a viral moment. Lila's heart pounded, but her voice stayed steady. "I think real talent doesn't need to make other people feel small to shine." A few people murmured in approval. Caleb's smile froze. He wasn't used to being challenged, not publicly. "Oh, we've got a philosopher in the house," he said loudly, eyes glinting. "Tell you what, Lila from the office, since you've got such strong opinions, why don't you come up here and show us how it's done?" The crowd roared. Half of them cheered, half waited for her to crumble. Lila sat frozen for a second, heat rushing to her ears. This wasn't banter anymore, it was a trap. "Come on!" Caleb pressed, holding out his hand. "If talent speaks for itself, here's your big chance to let it talk." Her stomach twisted. Every instinct screamed no. But somewhere deeper, somewhere tired of swallowing humiliation and walking away, another voice whispered enough. She stood. The audience gasped as she walked toward the stage, the glow of 100 phones following her every step. Each footfall felt heavy, echoing in her chest. By the time she reached the stairs, the room had gone eerily quiet. Caleb turned to the crowd like a ringmaster. "Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for Lila from accounting." Polite laughter, scattered claps. Everyone expected a train wreck. So did he. Lila climbed the final step, the spotlight swallowing her whole. She took the microphone he offered, cool metal against trembling hands. "So," Caleb drawled, smirking, "what's it gonna be?" "Please don't say karaoke night." Lila lifted her chin. "Actually," she said, her voice steady and clear, "I have something else in mind." The audience leaned forward as the lights dimmed further. She closed her eyes and remembered. Her mother singing softly while cooking dinner. Her old music teacher telling her she had something rare. All those years she'd hidden that voice, convinced it didn't matter anymore. But standing there, under the heat of the lights, something inside her woke up. And when she opened her mouth, the first note that came out wasn't just sound, it was truth. The first note drifted out like a breath she'd been holding her entire life. Soft. Uncertain. Human. For a heartbeat, nobody moved. Then something shifted in the room, a hush so complete it felt sacred. The orchestra behind Caleb hesitated, glancing at each other, unsure whether to follow. They didn't need to. Lila's voice carried its own rhythm, pure and unadorned, floating through the theater like a secret finally spoken aloud. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't polished. It was real. Her tone wrapped around the words, fragile at first, then steadying as memory and muscle woke together. She sang not to impress but to remember, the warmth of her mother humming over a simmering pot, the creak of the old church piano where she'd first learned harmony, the echo of every song she'd never had the courage to share. Each lyric came from that hidden place where fear and longing live side by side. On stage, Caleb froze. The smirk that had carried him through 1,000 sold-out arenas faltered, replaced by something rawer, confusion, maybe awe. He'd meant to humiliate her, to turn her into a meme. Instead, she was unraveling the glossy fabric of his show right before his eyes. Lila opened her eyes midway through the second verse. The blinding lights no longer mattered. She could see faces now, astonished, rapt, some already shining with tears. Even the crew had stopped moving. The moment belonged to her alone. She stepped forward, letting her voice swell. What started as a whisper bloomed into something powerful enough to rattle the chandeliers. Every note carried weight, not the trained strength of a star but the grounded honesty of someone who's lived every word she sings. People forgot their phones. Screens dimmed one by one as hands lowered, replaced by expressions of quiet wonder. A few audience members reached for each other without realizing why. Caleb tried to recover, forcing a grin, gesturing for the band to join in, but the guitarist shook his head slightly. This wasn't his stage anymore. The spotlight, the air, the heartbeat of the room, all of it belonged to Lila. By the bridge, she wasn't singing at them. She was lifting them. Every fear, every humiliation she'd swallowed over the years, burned away in that voice. When she sang of being lost and finally found, people believed her. They felt found too. The song built toward a final rise, not the flashy key change of a pop anthem but the quiet triumph of someone stepping back into her own skin. Lila drew a trembling breath and let the last note soar, clean and bright, like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Silence. A vast, electric silence. Then a single clap, deliberate, ringing, from somewhere in the balcony. Another followed. Then another. And then the flood, a roaring, thunderous ovation that shook the floor. People rose to their feet, shouting her name though they'd only just learned it. Lila! 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 She stood there, blinking through tears, the mic still warm in her hand. For a moment, she didn't quite understand what she'd done, only that something inside her had cracked open, and the world had poured in. Caleb approached slowly, his trademark swagger gone. Under the harsh lights he looked younger, smaller. He began, voice unsteady, I don't have words. Lila turned to him, breathing hard. Music isn't about control, she said quietly. It's about connection. Maybe you forgot that. He nodded once, no witty comeback, no smirk. Just a man realizing he'd been seen through. The crowd's applause rolled on, refusing to fade. Caleb lifted her hand and raised it toward the audience. Give it up, he said hoarsely, for Lila Carter. And the roar redoubled. For the first time in years, she didn't shrink from attention. She let the moment touch her fully, the sound, the faces, the shared heartbeat of thousands of strangers. It wasn't fame she felt. It was belonging. As the noise softened into murmurs, she handed back the microphone. Thank you, she whispered, not just to them, but to herself, to the woman who'd finally stopped hiding. She stepped down from the stage, the light dimming behind her. People reached out as she passed, brushing her hand, murmuring beautiful, amazing, thank you. The same velvet seat waited for her, but she didn't sit. She just stood there for a second, trembling with the aftershock of being seen. Back on stage, Caleb watched her disappear into the crowd. The band began playing again, not one of his chart toppers, but a quiet instrumental, something wordless and humble. For the first time all evening, his smile wasn't part of an act. Outside, the night air hit cool and clean. Lila stepped into it like surfacing from deep water. The city lights shimmered, the street humming with cabs and laughter, and she realized her hands were still shaking, not from fear, but from something far more alive. Her phone buzzed, a message from Marcy. "How's the concert?" Lila laughed softly, typing back, "Unexpected." Then she added another word before hitting send. "Unforgettable." She tucked the phone away, lifted her face to the night, and for the first time in years, started humming, not anyone else's song, but her own. The next morning, Lila woke to the sound of her phone vibrating across the nightstand like a trapped bee. At first, she ignored it. She wasn't ready to face Monday, the spreadsheets, the small talk, the same lukewarm coffee in the break room. But the buzzing wouldn't stop. When she finally reached for it, the screen lit up with more notifications than she'd ever seen in her life. Mentions. Messages. Missed calls. Hundreds of them. She blinked, confused. Then she saw it, a video thumbnail of herself on stage, mid-song, eyes closed, the microphone clutched like a lifeline. The caption read, "Office girl destroys pop star live on stage." Her stomach dropped. She tapped it, and the sound of her own voice filled the room, the part of the night she'd barely remembered through the adrenaline. The comments were endless. "This gave me chills. Realest thing I've seen in years. She made him look human again. Who is this woman?" Lila covered her mouth, half laughing, half horrified. Her video had millions of views in less than 12 hours. Her ringtone shattered the moment. It was Marcy. "Lila Carter," came the voice on the other end, breathless. "You absolute legend. Do you have any idea what's happening online right now?" Lila groaned. "Unfortunately, yes. You're everywhere. My feed's full of you." CNN mentioned it this morning, the mystery woman who humbled pop star Caleb Vance. "God," Lila muttered, dragging a hand through her hair. "I didn't humble anyone. I just sang." "Yeah, well, the internet disagrees. You basically gave the world a masterclass in authenticity. You're trending, girl. Trending." Lila looked around her small apartment, the mismatched furniture, the plant she kept forgetting to water, the half-finished mug of tea from last night. It felt absurd that this was the epicenter of something everyone was suddenly talking about. She hung up and stared out the window. The city looked the same, buses groaning down the street, a man walking his dog, a teenager on a scooter. Nothing had changed, and yet everything had. Her inbox dinged again, this time an email. The subject line read, "From the management of Caleb Vance, urgent." She hesitated before opening it. "Dear Ms. Carter, Mr. Vance would like to personally apologize for the events that took place last night. He was deeply moved by your performance and wishes to meet you in person, if you're willing. Please let us know if you'd be open to a short conversation at your convenience." Lila set the phone down slowly. For a long time, she just sat there, staring at the sunlight spilling across the floor. Then, before she could talk herself out of it, she typed back a single line. "Sure. One conversation." 2 days later, she found herself standing outside a glass-walled cafe in the West Loop, her reflection trembling in the window. She'd almost cancelled 3 times on the drive over. What was she even doing here? Then the door opened, and Caleb Vance stepped out, minus the designer suit, minus the stage polish. He wore jeans, a hoodie, and a face that looked like it hadn't seen sleep in days. "Lila," he said softly. "Thanks for coming." She nodded, unsure what to do with her hands. "You said you wanted to talk." "I did." He exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. "I was an ass. What I did on that stage, I don't have an excuse for it." She folded her arms. "You don't need an excuse. You just need to learn from it." He gave a small, genuine smile. "That's the plan." They sat down inside. For a while, neither spoke. The hum of espresso machines filled the silence. Caleb finally broke it. You reminded me of why I started singing. Before the fame, before the labels. It used to mean something. You reminded me what that felt like. Lila met his eyes. Then do something about it. He nodded. I already am. He slid a small tablet across the table. On it was a video, a simple, raw recording. Caleb in a studio, alone, singing an acoustic version of one of his old songs. No auto-tune. No crowd. Just a man and a guitar. At the end, he'd added a line of text. Inspired by Lila Carter, the voice that reminded me to be honest again. Lila didn't know what to say. People think I made your night, he said. Truth is, you saved mine. Her throat tightened. You don't owe me that kind of credit. I do, he said quietly. And I intend to make it count. For the first time, she saw no arrogance in him, just a man trying to make peace with himself. They talked for nearly an hour, about music, life, fear, the strange way the world sometimes hands you a stage when you least expect it. When they finally stood to leave, Caleb extended his hand. You ever think about recording something? She laughed, shaking her head. I think I've had enough spotlight for one lifetime. Maybe, he said, smiling faintly. But the world might disagree. Outside, the afternoon sun turned the city gold. Lila walked away without looking back, the weight of the last few days lifting with every step. That night, alone in her apartment, she sat by the window and hummed again, the same melody she'd sung on stage, softer now, for no one but herself. Across town, Caleb uploaded his acoustic video. Within hours, the comments filled with gratitude and hope. She changed him. He sounds real again. Music needed this. And though Lila didn't see it right away, the world had quietly shifted around her. Not because she became famous, but because she'd reminded people, including herself, that truth still had a sound.